Hearing will return to order. The chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Washington, Ms. Strickland.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers. I represent Joint Base Lewis McChord, home to over 40,000 active duty service members and their families. JBLM is the Department of Defense's most important installation for projecting power into the Indo-Pacific region, hosting the Army's 1st Corps and 1/3 of the Air Force's entire C-17 fleet. I want to start by recognizing the Army's 250th birthday. I am an Army brat myself. My father served in the military. He joined the Army when it was segregated, and he continued to serve when President Truman desegregated, something that probably would have been defined as woke back then. I could not be more proud of the soldiers who make up the Army what it is. And as part of the celebration, the Pentagon is going to host a day-long festival and parade estimated to cost up to $45 million. Department of Defense officials have described this as a generational recruiting tool and a plan to highlight every era and legendary leaders throughout Army history. So Secretary Hegseth, do you plan to include displays of Colin Powell, our first Black chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff? Will you include displays about the Japanese-American 442nd Regimental Combat Team, one of the most decorated units of all time? Will you include displays about Major General Charles Calvin Rogers, whose Medal of Honor your department previously labeled as DEI? Recent articles by Stars and Stripes, Military Times, and others outline how your team has gone to great lengths to wipe out references of these American heroes. I'm incredibly concerned and actually disappointed that you will continue trying to tell an incomplete story about the Army's proud history, especially when you consider that 40% of those who are serving, who are enlisted, represent minority communities. So I'm going to ask you, sir, will you be able to talk about these things and will they be included? And then I have another question after that. Go ahead.
Well, Congresswoman, I do not accept your insinuation that we would seek to disclude any race or group of people in representing 250 years of incredible service of the United States Army, including your father's, which I thank him for. We're proud that we're going to put on full display the Army's military might 250 years on, which is a demonstration of American freedom, power, and commitment.
And I agree. Are these three people that I mentioned going to be included in this celebration?
This is a parade demonstrating military might, capabilities through the years, including to today.
Yes, and there will be exhibits. So will these folks be included, sir?
Well, I think you'll be heartened to know that the Secretary of Defense is not involved in choosing individual exhibits in the celebration, but our team has put in a great deal of effort to make sure the Army's history is well represented. And I'll say this, as a part of the reason I'm sitting right here and I put on the uniform is a parade that went through my parents' hometown in Wanamingo, Minnesota. Blink and you miss it, nothing farm town.
Absolutely. Now I'm talking about the exhibition, sir.
It made me
I'm talking
proud
about the exhibition. Are you going to include Colin Powell, the Japanese-American 442nd, or Major General Charles Calvin Rogers? That's my question.
I'm sure we will include a cross-section of a lot of incredible Americans and possibly all of them too. I have no idea.
So you have no idea, or I'm going to take that as a no. All right, next question. Let's talk about Ukraine and Russia. So we know that Russia started this war. They have long been an adversary of the United States. And at the same time, you heard the president make some really interesting comments, not including Russia in the widespread random tariffs. So I think one question I will ask you as we talk about wanting peace, because we all agree that's a desired outcome, do you and the president support surrender to Russia by Ukraine as your definition of peace?
Ma'am, no one has talked about surrender. We're talking about a negotiated peace.
So does that mean that you're okay with Russia keeping this territory that they're trying to take so they can march on to one of our NATO allies?
Ma'am, I think the situation is unfortunate, unleashed by the previous administration. But everyone that talks about winning and prevailing has yet to present to me a plan that's going to push the Russian army out of those territories.
So, sir, I appreciate you talking about the previous administration often, but we are now in this administration. So as the person who serves at the pleasure of the U.S. president, do you believe that Russia is a true adversary, and is your definition of peace going to be surrender of Ukraine from this invasion?
Ma'am, I've never said surrender, and we're prepared to negotiate what we hope will be a lasting peace.
Thank you. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Guam, Mr. Moylan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to our distinguished witnesses, Ms. McDowell, Secretary Headstaff, and General Kane for your service and appearing before us today. Secretary Headstaff, I also want to thank you for visiting Guam, and it's great to see you once again, sir. Thank you very much. I appreciate your keeping an eye on the Pacific Deterrence Initiative, sir, and wanting to make sure that our construction, our readiness projects on Guam stay on time and on budget. Considering the complexity of working in our isolated territory, of course, with workforce constraints and logistical constraints as well, tell us about the mechanisms that you have in place to ensure we maintain our time and budget on the Pacific Deterrence Initiative, sir.
Well, thank you for the question, sir. It was great to visit you. I will say a big part of that is focus and attention and time, and I was struck, not to be critical of any of my predecessors in this context, but that it had been over 20 years since the Secretary of Defense had visited Guam. It was one of the first places we felt like we should go because our focus is in the Indo-Pacific, and the troops we have there, the capabilities we have there, the facilities we have there, the forward posture we want to maintain there, Guam being a central part of that. So seeing is understanding. We came back from that with an even better understanding of what that island and other parts of multiple island chains needed to consider deterring China. And then our group went right to work responsive to many of the things we spoke about, but also to ensure that this budget funds those priorities. So indeed, the Pacific Deterrence Initiative is increased robustly through this budget, and then a lot of other ways in which Guam will be a part of the future fight.
I thank you, and I also ask for your continued support. Our main workforce there is the H-2B workers, which we'll be looking at to extend once again with your support. So thank you, Mr. Secretary. One thing that would be helpful for our contractors on Guam is regarding the design, bid, and build. So this makes a lot of delays and change orders and cost overruns due to our site locations and our logistical complexities. As the department, or I asked the department also to review some lessons learned from the design build versus design bid build models. Instead, that will really speed things up, and I'm hoping your budget will enable more flexibility for our contracting strategies to do just that.
One of the core pillars of how we're changing MilCon acquisitions is flexibility, with a recognition that each site, CONUS or OCONUS or more far-flung, has unique complexities, workforce complexities, logistical challenges, resourcing challenges that need to allow the local leadership there to adapt as quickly as possible. And the last thing the DoD usually does well, especially the bureaucracy, is adapt. So we're trying to give maximum flexibility and latitude, sir.
That will be extremely helpful. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. And then General Kane, you know, with the transition to fully integrate Guam Defense System, GDS, how are we synchronizing the existing capabilities like THAAD and Aegis Ashore and the Golden Dome? Architect plans to ensure seamless integration with global missile warning and reconnaissance systems.
Well, sir, thanks for the question, and thanks also for your service in the Army previously. You know, the importance of integrating our defense capabilities is critical, and as we look at systems like that and Aegis Ashore, you know, the department is looking carefully at what has to be true to make sure that the other systems like GDA are able to bring forward a layered defense system from sensing layer all the way through the kinetic layer to ensure that we don't have any gaps. And so that's something I know the team that is running GDA, the team that's running THAAD and Aegis are doing, sir, down in the services.
Thank you. And I think a lot of research will be done for the island of Guam to make sure this is right to protect our nation and our island at such a forward proximity. And then this lessons learned from that will help our nation build on the Golden Dome. Would that be a correct statement?
Sir, I think, our goal is to share lessons from not only your home, but the other places that GDI and Golden Dome will be a part of. And so they do accelerate our learning, sir.
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair now recognizes the gentlelady from New Jersey, Ms. Sherrill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Hegseth, Chairman Kane, thank you both for being here today. Mr. Secretary, your testimony over the last several days before Congress, I've heard you speak about all of your supposed accomplishments from your time at the Pentagon. I have to say, your training at Fox News has let you spin months of dangerous dysfunction and incompetence into catchy phrases like restoring the warrior ethos and increasing lethality. But the truth is, it's really been chaos at the Pentagon under your leadership. You've clearly shown you're unable to manage the Department of Defense, but what I'm most concerned about are three specific areas: your operational incompetence, your managerial incompetence, and your budgetary incompetence. So let's start with operational. According to news reports, in your first week on the job, you got confused in a National Security Council meeting and thought President Trump wanted you to stop all aid to Ukraine. In a well-functioning administration, you would have asked for clarification before making that seismic policy shift, but instead you ordered vital military aid heading to the front lines turned around, costing the U.S. millions of dollars and depriving Ukrainian soldiers of equipment they needed to fight Russia. So, Mr. Secretary, can you explain how exactly you misunderstood such a monumental presidential order?
One of many fake news headlines we've dealt with.
So President Trump told you to halt military aid to Ukraine on January 30th?
As is often the case, highly ideological and very ill-informed reporters love to speculate about things they know nothing about in order to spear President Trump and myself.
So it sounds like actually the reporting is correct, because I will say, if it wasn't a mistake, why did aid restart only a few days later?
Again, we would take complete issue with what would some call reporting and others call a hatchet job.
So why did aid start just a couple days later?
I'm saying the reporting is inaccurate, ma'am.
I don't think that's correct. So let's move on to your managerial incompetence. I think we can see why you misunderstood the president, because you're obviously misunderstanding my questions. Less than a month into the job, you fired the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, C.Q. Brown, and the chief of naval operations, Lisa Franchetti, without cause. And to this day, you still have not provided an adequate explanation for removing them. As far as I can tell, you fired C.Q. Brown because he was black and Lisa Franchetti because she is a woman. So nearly 4 months later, we still don't have a new nominee for Chief of Naval Operations. News reports, and you can contest it, but I'd love to hear your answer, say that you haven't nominated someone because qualified admirals keep turning the position down. So tell me, Mr. Secretary, when will Congress receive your nomination for the next chairman of the next chief of naval operations?
Ma'am, with all due respect, I would suggest not believing every headline you read.
With all due respect, I'd like your nomination. When will we see it?
There is not a single admiral or any military official has turned down a position that's been
So when will we
provided.
see your nominee for the chief of naval operations?
In due time, for all the right reasons.
Again, I think we've seen the managerial incompetence. Okay, let's move on to budgetary incompetence. You missed the deadline to submit a draft defense budget to Congress, which makes it impossible for us to complete our work on the NDAA or appropriations, and makes it more likely you'll receive delays in funding you need for new acquisitions, programs, and other priorities. Additionally, you're blowing money on poorly conceived operations and vanity projects for President Trump. Retrofitting the Qatari jet to serve as Air Force One will cost about $400 million. The parade in D.C. this weekend will cost upwards of $40 million. Your bombing campaign in Yemen cost about $1 billion, and a week later they were having missile strikes in Israel. Your operations in L.A. will cost tens of millions of dollars, and you claim to be cutting costs at the Pentagon, but all I see are wasted dollars better spent addressing our most pressing threats like China. So, Mr. Secretary, what priorities have you cut funding for to pay for these projects?
Ma'am, I would just say your list left off securing the southern border.
So, Mr. Secretary, what priorities have you cut funding for to pay for these projects?
We make trade-offs every day, and I would imagine what we want to spend on is quite different than what the previous administration did.
Well, I think
Made
the American
those changes quickly, and they're reflected in this budget, and we're very proud of them.
I think the American people can see why I'm so concerned about this incompetence. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Mills.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Secretary and the panel. Let me just go ahead and commend you on an amazing job that you've done, not only in highlighting the importance of the warfighter, but also guaranteeing that our recruitment and retention is at the highest levels that we've seen. This is due to good leadership, not managerial problems, as one of my colleagues just tried to reiterate, and will note for the record is walking away because they know they don't want to hear the actual facts and truth. I'm going to go through a couple of things. They keep bringing up this plane, this aircraft. Well, let's go through history. This has been a long-standing cultural share, as aviation was one of the most remarkable things that man had innovated. And in 1945, President FDR actually gifted a Douglas DC-3 to King Abdulaziz, which marked the beginning of civil aviation in Saudi Arabia. The airplane is nothing more than a reason to complain about the president advancing U.S. interests, and this is more to conflate optics than actual outcomes. But we'll let them go ahead and spend their wills on a $400 million upgrade, not realizing the total cost of an aircraft. I think that's a cost savings and a good negotiation. Now, they talked about the Golden Dome. There's a lot of things that's intentionally left off operationally and classified to ensure that we can keep the sovereignty and protection of our nation without our adversaries actually knowing it. Our colleagues know this, but they want to try and highlight it in a way that brings about that you're trying to hide or not be transparent, as opposed to operational and communication security. But what they should be realizing is that there's a real violation of the 1962 Outer Space Treaty. That when the leak was made about Sputnik 2's capabilities and what Russia was trying to do to arm and weaponize from a nuclear capability in space, that maybe we should take a vital interest in not just what we're seeing here on Earth, but what we're seeing abroad as well. The president knew this in the first administration, which is why he created Space Force. I'll also go ahead and talk about DEI. Our recruitment and retention is high because we're no longer factoring diversity, equity, inclusion. We're focused on increased lethality, readiness, and being properly equipped. The warfighter ethos that he claimed was so intact. If it was intact, we wouldn't lower our standards. And our standards aren't arbitrary. The standards that you are setting for our armed forces are based on real military and combat needs that we have seen and evaluated, and usually lessons that are left from bloodshed and loss of life that we then base our standards upon to guarantee that we have the best, strongest, and most prepared warfighters and the greatest voluntary force in the world. With procurement reform, I love the fact that you're going after the ideas that it's not about trying to have the most expensive at 100%, but what actually functions, works, and saves cost effectiveness and readiness, and having it on the table for our warfighter now, not in 5 years from now. So again, a great achievement. When we talk about recruitment and retention, one of the things I wanted to bring up, and I hope that you'll address, is those who are, in my opinion, unconstitutionally purged from our military for actually having their medical and religious rights denied. And I would like to see these individuals who are wrongfully purged given the opportunity to not only return to serve in our armed forces and our nation, not a political agenda, but to also have the ability to be re-incentivized by having back pay, full benefits, and being able to be returned to the ranks that they deserve without it being politicized. You know, I think that we should start naming a lot of our cities in Texas and in New Mexico and Arizona something that was by a Ukrainian city. Then our other colleagues might actually care about the protection of our borders. This is one thing that you've actually done great by sending our military down there, and we have a 600% increase in apprehension rates and a complete decrease in human and sex trafficking and fentanyl and opioids that are killing Americans by the thousands. Now, when it comes to the cartels, the president has designated our cartels, rightfully so, as a foreign terrorist organization. What can Congress provide to DOD in order to better support the mission, the physical security of service members in the southern border, and is there a possibility of maybe a Title 55, Title 11, Title 10 combination that will allow us to be able to work with DOD and the IC to be able to start going after those cartels?
Well, I appreciate those comments, sir. And As I mentioned earlier, it wasn't really an authorities issue when it came to securing the southern border. The previous administration claimed they needed new policies. No, we needed a new president who was serious about it, and so we have focused on it, rightly designating those criminal cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. Right now, we believe we have those authorities. If necessary, we would come to Congress for additional ones.
Thank you so much. And again, I want to commend you as well on the operations against the Houthis. The previous administration had delisted as a terrorist organization, which was disrupting 12% of global trade, in addition to the Bidenflation that was sinking the middle class. So thank you for what you're doing. We stand by to support you. I'm going to support you from day one, as I always have. Keep fighting, and let's go ahead and go after the war fighters. Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from New York, Mr. Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you both for being here. We have all worn the uniform. We've all served in combat. We all love our country. We all revere our troops. And I really want to speak with you both, not as partisans, but as patriots. And I want to talk specifically about the events at Fort Bragg the other day. General Kane, I want to start with you. As a junior officer, were you ever required to make a pledge of political loyalty? Yes or no?
Sir, as you know, we're
General,
an apolitical
I have limited
military,
time.
so, no.
Thank you. At any time in your 30-plus years of incredibly distinguished service, did you have to make a pledge of partisan or political loyalty?
No, sir.
Thank you. Did you ever serve in any unit or command at any level where service members were required to make a pledge of political loyalty?
No, sir.
Thank you. And I want to commend you. You've been on the record on this, including in your confirmation hearings where you clarified, quote, "I've never worn any political merchandise or said anything to that effect." I appreciate that. That is the standard, and I commend you for saying so and continuing to model that. General Kane, one last question for you. Should soldiers have to pledge political loyalty to participate in an event with our commander-in-chief? Yes or no, please?
Sir, I'm not, first, no. I'm not aware of any time in history that soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines have been asked to do that. I think. I'm
sorry, General. I do want to, just in the interest of time, I want to talk about what happened at Fort Bragg 2 days ago. There was guidance put out, and this has been verified by multiple independent news outlets, saying, quote, these are to the soldiers of the 18th Airborne Corps and the U.S. Army. If soldiers have political views that are in opposition to the current administration, then they need to speak with their leadership and get swapped out. This is swapped out of the event with the president. In addition, in an incredibly disturbing incident, there was a pop-up shop selling MAGA merchandise on post at Fort Bragg. And to summarize this, there was a commander from Bragg who said on the record, quote, "This has been a bad week for the Army, for anyone who cares about us being a neutral institution. This was shameful." If those are the facts, and I know the Army is investigating at least the MAGA pop-up shop, is that appropriate, General Kane?
Sir, I haven't seen any of these reports. I'm not familiar with them, but as I mentioned earlier and in my confirmation hearing, the nation demands a apolitical, nonpartisan military.
I appreciate you saying that and happy to share those reports. Secretary Hegseth, are you familiar with DoD Directive 1344.10? Political activities of the members of the armed forces?
First off, I don't buy into your
yes or no?
insinuation
Are you familiar
that pledges
with,
are being done under this administration. That's
I reclaim my
insinuation.
time. Are you familiar with this DoD directive?
There's never one time in my service or in this
Mr.
Defense
Secretary,
Department.
will you please answer
I'm answering your
these
question
questions?
where politics has been considered for service members.
Are you familiar with this directive? Yes or no?
Which directive?
DoD Directive 1344.10. I'm happy to provide you a copy. There's even a one-page red and green cheat sheet. Are you familiar with it? This is the same directive from when we were all in uniform.
I'm sure I am.
Has anything changed in that directive under your guidance, given what happened 2 days ago at Fort Bragg? Is there a new policy change that we're not aware of?
Again, I totally reject your insinuation.
Is there a policy change to DoD Directive 1344.10?
I know what you're attempting to insinuate, but there's
I'll
been
take
no
that as a
policy
no.
change and there is no policy.
Mr. Secretary, have you ever worn a MAGA hat in front of the troops?
I own plenty of MAGA hats, but I don't.
Have you ever worn one in front of the troops at an official event? I don't believe so. I don't believe so. Do you think it's appropriate for the President of the United States to wear political merchandise, including a MAGA hat, at official events, including West Point commencement?
The Commander-in-Chief
Yes or no?
can wear whatever hat he wants, to include the phrase, "Make America Great Again," because I would like to make America great again as well.
So you think that's appropriate?
The Commander-in-Chief has the right, in front of his troops, to wear whatever he'd like.
Okay, I strongly disagree with you. And I urge you both, especially you, General Kane, as we see an increasingly political rhetoric, including from the Secretary, to please, for the good of our troops, this is an incredibly difficult moment, and we need leaders like you to continue to echo the apolitical nature. I have 12 seconds. Mr. Secretary, I don't say this lightly. I have to say this on the record. I think your tenure as Secretary of Defense has been shameful and weak, and you should resign. I yield back.
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair now recognizes gentleman from Texas, Mr. Fallon.
Mr. Secretary, we'll have a little bit of time to talk about all that. General Kane, is it true or not true that in 1988 you were at Plattsburgh Air Force Base as an ROTC cadet?
Yes, sir, I think I was, yeah.
Do you recognize the person that you're addressing right now?
Yeah, I actually do. Yes, sir. Please don't tell anybody how we did out there.
We did. We were athletic officers in 1980.
Yes, we were.
I believe you worked for me at the time.
I did, sir. I still do.
Kinda, yeah. And just for the record, there was a Commandant Award recognizing the best cadet of all 200, and they got that right because it was the man sitting in front of me, General Kane, who won that. So I got out as a captain, so you're winning. General Kane, I want to talk to you about the lessons learned in Ukraine and how important that is. I also sit on the Intelligence Committee, and how we can best deter in the Indo-Pacific, because that is of vital import. We don't want to get into a war with a peer adversary. And then if you could also just touch on the importance of innovation and acquisition reform.
Yes, sir. As I've talked about before, the entrepreneurial spirit out there in Europe is one that we've all learned from. And as we look at creating multiple simultaneous cognitive, fiscal, and physical dilemmas for our adversaries around the world, we have to take that same entrepreneurial spirit and bring it back here to our nation, both in our national and our defense industrial base. So the importance of mass scale, building a DIB and a national base that can provide the combat capability that our warfighters need at the tactical edge is something that both the Secretary and I, as well as the services, are very focused on.
Oh, thank you, and you're both a breath of fresh air. Mr. Secretary, I wanted to visit with you a little bit about recruiting first, and then I do want to talk about politics in the military. We have seen recruiting bump, thank the Lord, over the last 3-4 years. It was a crisis, and if we didn't solve it, I don't know what we're going to do. So I would like to ask you, because I've asked each of the secretaries of each branch to really do a deep dive and come back to Congress and let us know, because I want to start with doubts and end uncertainties. Find out the reasons why the change, whatever they may be, because whatever we're doing right, we need to continue to do so we don't get in this situation. And if you all need some extra funding, if you have folks that are willing to come in, I would rather have a few more than a few less. And also want to talk about the fact that I think you are a breath of fresh air, not only the general, but yourself, because the first thing that you said to us was you are going to reintroduce warfighting and lethality and force projection into our military, and you specifically said that you did not want to see politics infest, because we had people up here in the last few years that were clearly like a Democratic general. I never want to see that again. I don't want to see a Republican general. I want to see American generals, and American generals only ever address us. And I thought it was a travesty, and I have a case in point. We have here, this individual was, I believe, a major in the Army, was exalted and venerated above all 2 million active and reservists by the DOD, the former DOD. Why? Was there any excellence that was done? Was there a life saved? Was there a computer program written by cyber? No, it was because this person was transsexual and they had a political flag in uniform and they were waving it. That was disgusting, not because there was a transsexual, because that was a political statement, and this person did nothing of excellence at all to be recognized. And instead, we should be venerating people like Gary Gordon and Randy Shugar, who gave their lives to save Mike Durant and won the Medal of Honor. That's the lethality. That's what will deter the Chinese, and that's what will deter our enemies. And I'd like to give you 1 minute and 13 seconds to expound on that and maybe answer Mr. Ryan. Thank you.
Well, amen, and you're exactly right. That's precisely what we want to return to and restore. And every accusation and insinuation that that is politicizing is blatantly false, and they know it. Ultimately, there were ideologies and particular political perspectives being injected into our forces. Call it political correctness, call it DEI, call it CRT, call it what you want. They were being injected in. Our job has been to remove those political ideologies and go back to basics. High standards that are the same. We're not looking at race, we're not emphasizing your differences, we're focusing on our unity, which is the point of any formation. Every formation I've ever looked at, I didn't look at the race or background of the people in that formation. I wanted the most capable leader, squad leader, team leader across the spectrum, able to do the job, because when it hits the fan, that's what I need, and our enemies need to see that. And let me say something about the chairman. He is the most professional, apolitical, military expert I've ever worked with, and our country is grateful, should be grateful, to have him at the helm, because they are in very steady, apolitical hands. And he does
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from New Mexico, Mr. Vasquez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, I understand that the border is a top priority for you and the Department of Defense. Well, it's also one of my top priorities in my border district. That's why I've introduced bipartisan legislation to stop fentanyl at the border, secure our ports of entry, hire more CBP personnel, and combat the cartels, areas that I'm sure we agree on. Now, DOD has spent more than $525 million from the defense budget on military operations on the border. You've done it by diverting over $1 billion from military modernization and quality of life programs like housing. And as such, I'm sure you're well informed as to what your warfighters are doing on our border and the characteristics of the border itself. Secretary Hegseth, do you know how many border miles there are in New Mexico?
Not the exact number of miles.
Can you give me a round figure?
Hundreds.
Okay, 180 miles. Can you tell me where the border wall starts and ends on this map of New Mexico?
I'm not properly oriented to your map, but I know that unfortunately, because of the administration previous, they did not have the opportunity to finish the border wall.
Thank you,
let it rust
Secretary.
on the ground instead of
Thank you,
putting it up.
Secretary. And you have been to
our
New
border.
Mexico. Could you tell me where in New Mexico you've been to?
I've been to the border twice to look at once at our national defense area down there because I can't recall a time when a Secretary of Defense has gone down in the first 4 or 5 months of his tenure to the border to better understand.
Was that in
the
an urban
situation
area
there.
or in a rural area?
Both areas, traversed rural areas and urban.
Okay, so you must be
some
familiar.
with walls, some without.
Secretary.
And if President Trump was actually supported, we'd have a
Thank
border
you, Secretary. I reclaim my time. So the most remote part of New Mexico is called the Boot Heel. And I'm not sure that you spent any time in the Boot Heel of New Mexico. Mr. Secretary, I was raised on the border. I've lived there my whole life. I've worked alongside ranchers, farmers, landowners, wildlife biologists, and other stakeholders for over a decade. I headed a border security task force in my district before coming to Congress. I've traveled with Border Patrol on ATVs. I've hunted the border on horseback and hiked dozens of miles in the most remote stretches of the border in this region. Now, do you happen to know why there hasn't been a border wall built in the Boot Heel?
Well, based on what you just described, you should be a big fan of what our administration is.
Well, Secretary, I'm asking why a border wall has not been built. Funds have been allocated for other parts of the border.
Here's what I know. Our commanders on the ground and others and our engineers would understand what goes where and why, and where there should be a border wall, there will be a border wall.
Okay,
it will be
Secretary,
funded through reconciliation.
Secretary, are you familiar with the Animas
deliver on
Mountains,
it.
with Alamo Hueco, with San Luis Mountains, with Guadalupe Pass or Long Canyon?
Again,
Critical border areas.
I'm aware that there are gaps in different places where walls are not as much as effective as other places, and I get that.
Thank
We're
you,
applying
Secretary.
infrastructure
I appreciate your answer
where it
on that.
makes the most sense, because
Thank
we're
you.
going to get 100% operational
Thank you,
control of the border.
Secretary. So you agree then that a border wall doesn't make sense for the entire country?
I think we need a border wall across our entire border.
Okay, so you should know then why it's almost physically impossible to build a border across the Animas Mountains and the terrain challenges that that poses and the billions of dollars. Do you know if there's roads on those mountains currently?
If we're going to spend money as a government,
Okay.
it should be
I'll take that as a no.
secure our southern
Well,
border.
the point I'm trying to make, Secretary, is that if this is so important to the military, and you as Secretary of the Department of Defense should know more about the border. Mr. Secretary, I urge you to skip the photo ops next time that you go to a port of entry and spend time on the ground in places like the Diamond Day Ranch.
I think you should ask the soldiers on the border whether they've been photo op visits or not, because I spent a lot
Secretary-
of time on the ground
Secretary,
with
are
the
you-
soldiers, getting an understanding of what
Secretary,
they're
I'm
facing,
gonna
what
ask
they're
you a
doing,
question
what
that-
their capabilities are.
Secretary, I reclaim my
Not for a
time.
photo op.
Thank you.
As a
Secretary, I reclaim my
to
time.
understand what our
Chairman,
troops
may I
do
reclaim my
and
time?
why.
Gentleman
they
reclaims
do it.
his time.
Thank you. Secretary, do you know what a tethered aerostat system is?
I do.
Okay, well, great. Then you know that this type of surveillance technology is superior to having thousands of troops sitting in trucks looking at an empty desert. I've requested funds for more tethered aerostat systems. We haven't had a response from your department. Are you familiar with ASTs?
What's an AST?
Well, it's an autonomous surveillance tower. They're equipped with these advanced cameras that have the capability to relay critical information to border agents on the ground. And this type of technology is badly needed on the boot heel. And it's a much better expenditure than a border wall is.
I've seen that. I've seen those towers in use.
Great. Well, these technologies have been described to me by both Border Patrol and CBP as force multipliers, allowing their personnel to focus on law enforcement efforts while leaving this mundane surveillance task to much more efficient and cost-effective technology, a much more efficient way to surveil that part of the border. Now, Mr. Secretary, I have serious concerns with your fundamental lack of knowledge about the U.S.-Mexico border, considering the billions of dollars that DOD is slated to spend on this mission, with little clarity to those of us who live there. I would encourage you to do some homework on my region and learn what will actually make our border more secure and more safe. Thank you, Chairman. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Georgia, Dr. McCormick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I think it's great that the Democrats are finally concerned about the border. It's fantastic. I hope more of them join that fight in the future. It's fantastic, especially after 4 years of allowing millions upon millions across the border without any concern until now. When we talk about politicizing the military, I find it also very laughable when, for the first time, if you were to wear a make the military accountable to the mission again hat, would that be considered political?
I think in many ways that's one of our slogans.
Okay, exactly. Mission accomplishment, when I was a young Marine and an old Marine, we were always focused on the mission accomplishment. One of the greatest things you've done is brought us back to our focal point, the ethos of the warrior. Make America great, again, also I disqualify as political. That's something that every politician should want to do, let alone any military or non-military person that lives in America. So I dismiss that as political. I'm glad that you brought the mission back to all services. As a matter of fact, when I was down at University of North Georgia and we challenged you to come down to one of the Elite Eight, I was really impressed. I've always made fun of the Army, no offense to my Army comrades, about their PT. They were bringing it. They made it scientific. They're mission-oriented. They are absolutely focused 100% in large part because of the new leadership of the military, which I'm really excited about. And I'm looking forward to getting you down there. One of the interesting things that happened recently is the activation of the National Guard in California. This had to be done because, quite frankly, California didn't take care of its own. We actually recently sponsored and wrote legislation that would make those states culpable for the finances that are spent on those National Guardsmen when the governor or the local magistrates don't do what's required to take control of their own problem that was created because of their lack of action. Do you think that's a good idea, or do you have a better idea for motivating people to do what's right instead of having the president step in?
I think what the president has done here is common sense. If a governor and a mayor will not protect federal law enforcement officers in the execution of their basic functions, then the military, whether it's the National Guard or the Marines, is constitutionally or through statute allowed to come in and provide that security. That's precisely what we've done. The president, unlike in 2020 in Minnesota, when Governor Walz allowed a precinct to burn down, President Trump said that will not happen. We will get in front of this. We will not allow this to cascade. We will protect our law enforcement. And he's provided that clarity and common sense, and we're proud to be on that mission.
I'm glad the president stepped in where local Democrats have not stepped up to the plate. One of the things I noticed in my recent experience as a veteran is I had to go down to the DEER's office in person, take a half a day off. Now, luckily I have staff that can help me arrange those things, but I had to send in a form where my son, just to prove my son's still in college, instead of emailing it or faxing it or whatever we do in the modern technology, I do it at the DMV. I would hope that you and your leadership would help us as veterans make it a much more friendly 21st century experience. And I would hope that you would look at that just in your administration. I appreciate you very much. Finally, I want to give you an opportunity to talk about a little bit about Ukraine. One of the things I've said all along is the president's one of the most peaceful presidents there is. When they worry about invasions of foreign countries, this president has avoided war like no other president in modern history. He has actually been very good at foreign relations despite his lack of previous experience. Now he has a lot of, and he did the Abraham Accords. One of the things that I thought would be interesting when we talk about peace from strength, the United States and Europe combined have a $50 trillion GDP. Russia has 2. We decimated them, we meaning the Ukrainian forces, with our support, decimated 50% of their armor and about 1 million casualties just based on a little bit they've given. Do you think, according to the Supreme Allied Commander who was testifying here before, that if we gave them wholesale support, we could end this war very quickly if Russia won't come to the table per President Trump's guidance?
There are multiple ways in which we could help affect the front line and negotiations, and the department is prepared to support what might be necessary to do so, but our overall message is, and there's been billions spent already, and there are presidential drawdown authorities that exist right now that are still going in support of Ukraine, but our encouragement is that our European allies continue to step up as well.
General Kane, what do you think about Ukraine? You got about 10 seconds, sorry.
Well, sir, I think, obviously the killings got to stop on both sides, and that's, as all of us, thank you for your service as a warfighter, knows.
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair, now recognize the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. DeLuzio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Kane, I want to start with commending what you've said here today to Mr. Ryan and others about the apolitical nature of our military. I know it's a set of values that any of us who've served understand, that the military respects deeply civilian control, and that certainly runs up through Secretary Hegseth and to the Commander-in-Chief, no matter which party happens to be in the White House. I think even a pretty powerful example of that is when we have the State of the Union, you and the other members of the Joint Chiefs typically don't applaud for the more partisan parts of any president's remarks. Briefly, tell us why that is even a norm we should care about, why the American people should care about that norm.
Well, sir, that's codified in the oath of office, our Constitution, and our commission. So it goes all the way back to the beginnings, and that's always been our tradition.
I think it's an important tradition. I think it's one that we should care about no matter which side of this dais we're on, Democrats or Republicans. I think we should demand and expect that our most senior military commanders understand that partisan loyalty doesn't matter. What matters is the oath to the Constitution that we all take here, that any of us who've worn the uniform have taken. And I want to just ask some questions about the kinds of, I think, difficult positions commanders are going to be placed in, given what I saw happen at Fort Bragg, the guidance that exists now already for the military. And I ask this of you because you are not just the president's principal military advisor, you're the senior officer in armed forces. If you or any other commander were ordered to attend a campaign rally, you would decline. Am I right?
Sir, per the Hatch Act, which we get briefs on every year, it outlines pretty clearly what you can and can't do when you're in active service. And so I completely trust and believe in the professionalism of the United States Armed Forces, as does the Secretary, and we follow those guidelines.
And I agree with you. And my concern here is less that we're going to see bad decisions made by our troops or their commanders. I don't think it's the problem. I think the problem is they're going to be placed in really difficult positions by civilian leadership. And the Fort Bragg episode, to me, is one of those examples. And I'll talk about some of the things, and we've heard some of it brought up here today. And again, my questions are to help you, give you a chance to put out for the public what you expect of our senior military leaders. So some things that the president said in his remarks, referring to a political rival, the governor of California and the mayor of Los Angeles called them incompetent in front of the troops. Referring to Governor Walz, reference back to the debate between him and now Vice President J.D. Vance, saying that was a good debate. J.D. against this guy, remember how bad he was? He was one of the worst. I think he's running for president too, can you believe it? But he's a radical left lunatic. That's a quote. Referencing the continued lie that he didn't lose the 2020 election, President Trump said, and I quote, "I was thinking about running because the election was rigged and stolen. We all know it," end quote. That's what the Commander-in-Chief is saying in an event with troops who are ordered to attend. And let me be clear, presidents for a long time have always had the prerogative to compel the attendance of our troops to be there as the Commander-in-Chief. I get it. This is different to me. You heard discussion of the campaign merch being sold on the base. Another piece of this, and let's bring this up, invitations to the event went out from Donald Trump's campaign. Had an invitation right there taking you to a place where you can contribute to DonaldJTrump.com. And so my question, my concern is, of course, you and I don't think any commander would agree to attend a campaign rally, but you're brought to something that traditionally troops have attended, as they should with the commander-in-chief, but it turns into something that's a campaign rally. What should our commanders be doing when they're put in this position, General?
Well, sir, I hope you'll allow me to answer this. By even my engaging in answering this question, that is making my job involved in politics. And so while I appreciate the question, I think the chairman and the force should stay out of politics. And if I engage in this question and with deep respect and appreciation for your question, I don't think it's an appropriate question for me to answer.
General, that is, I agree with the way you're approaching this, and that's what we should expect of our leaders. In the 10 seconds or so I have left, I will tell you I'm very concerned for the position that you and other senior leaders are going to be placed in by this administration. I'd urge you as the President's principal military advisor to give him advice to knock it off. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Van Orden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, did you take an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States?
Yes, I did.
General, did you?
Yes, I did, sir.
Well, let's delve into that document. Article 2, Section 2, the President shall be the Commander-in-Chief of the Army and Navy of the United States and the militia of the several states. So when people are listening to the Commander-in-Chief, they are actually fulfilling their constitutional duty that they took an oath to defend and uphold the Constitution. And what these folks are saying is absolutely shameful, because when they are calling you incompetent, Mr. Secretary, guess who's listening? Our enemies. The people that are plotting as we sit in this comfortable room in an air-conditioned, beautiful space, they are plotting the deaths of us, Americans. And it is shameful, and I wish my colleagues would come back in here and apologize to you personally. Let's cover a couple other things here. When someone has gender dysphoria and they decide to mutilate their genitals and they're taking cross-sex hormones, they're out of pocket for about 3 years. How many countries is the DOD involved in right now? What? 50, 60, 80, 100, whatever it is, right? Okay, someone is going to get on a plane and leave their family and potentially leave their wife a widow or their husband a widower because somebody has decided to self-actualize. We're going to go forward and we're going to complete the mission because that's what we do. And a lot of my colleagues simply don't understand that, or they're trying to ignore it. Clear up a couple things. The former chief of naval operations was incompetent and gave the Red Sea to the Houthis. The former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff let so much DEI garbage fly around they almost destroyed the military. That's why they got fired. Okay, as far as standards, the standard is the minimum. That is the minimum level of performance that someone will reach, or they're not qualified for the job. The NFL does not have a standard for females. If you're a lady and you want to join the NFL, go try out for the team. How many women play in the NFL? Anybody? The answer is 0. Why is there an NBA and a WNBA? Why? Because they acknowledge biology. So we can have as many whiz-bang, high-tech things available, but at the end of the day, to win a war, you need someone to go in a room and beat someone to death with their hands. That's a fact. And all this other stuff is meaningless. The Chinese Communist Party does not care what your pronouns are. They care if they know we will be able to destroy them, crush them, and grind them into dust if they mess with the United States of America. Mr. Secretary, there's 5 soft truths. The first one is that people are more important than hardware. Do you concur?
I would concur with that and all of your previous statements.
Thank you, sir. General, do you concur that humans are more important than hardware?
I do, along with the other soft truths.
All right. Well, good on you. So here's an issue that I'm having right now. It doesn't matter how great our people are if they're not upholding this oath and understanding that the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, is the Commander-in-Chief, and that you are the Secretary of Defense, and that you are the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And we've had a rash of incidents around bases that can only be described as insubordination. Taking down the president's portrait, turning yours around, turning the vice president's pictures around, removing them from stations, covering them with flags. That's insubordination. And insubordination is a crime according to the United States, the UCMJ, Uniform Code of Military Justice. So what I just need to hear from you, Mr. Secretary, and I commend you for your performance or what you did for Fort McCoy in my district. I need to hear from you that you are actively trying to find the people that are subverting the chain of command, and then we will deal with them in the appropriate manner.
Every place where we find incidents like that or others, they're immediately addressed.
Thank you. General Kane, do you think it would be a political act for someone to be held accountable for insubordination? If you did that as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, holding soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, guardians?
Well, Congressman, of course, you'd have to have the context around that, so I'd want to know more information, sir.
Okay. I want to commend you for your performance today and your restraint by not lashing out at some of the most disgraceful comments I have ever heard in my short tenure in Congress, and with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Hawaii, Mr. Kuda.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I agree, we've had many performances today, but what we'd like is some answers. Mr. Secretary, did you invite Elon Musk for a briefing on war plans with China to the Pentagon? Yes or no is simple.
There's been a lot of hyperbole and incorrect reporting around that situation, but we did invite Elon over to come talk to us generally, but there was no war plans being discussed.
Okay, so whose idea was it to invite him to the Pentagon for a briefing? You mentioned you served at the pleasure of the president. Was it the president's will to have him come and be briefed?
Well, as you know, at that time, Elon Musk was leading up DOGE efforts, and we've taken a great investment in DOGE at DOD, and so getting his input on how we make DOD more efficient makes a great deal of sense.
Okay, but don't you think it's a conflict of interest for the world's richest man? Many of the contracts that the DOD is engaged in, billions of dollars of contracts going to his company, and he is, as to your point, was leading DOGE, which was involved in cutting hundreds of contracts, but also becoming intimately aware of the platforms and the requirements that would be given out for new contracts. Did you not think it was a conflict of interest to invite someone with financial interests into the Pentagon to have firsthand knowledge of what they could then bid on for their own, enrichment?
Ma'am, it was just an informal discussion, but I'll tell you, anyone that knows our Defense Department knows we show no preference to any company other than what your capabilities are, and we're grateful for the places where his companies benefit our national defense.
So for a $280 million donation, the world's richest man with companies intimately linked and involved in billion-dollar contracts with the Department of Defense gain access into the Pentagon. So would you say that any company right now that has multi-billion-dollar contracts with the Department of Defense has access to the Pentagon right now? 1-hour briefings with you personally?
On the regular basis,
the answer
I meet with many people and many different companies and many different aspects of our defense industrial base to ensure we have the best possible capabilities. It would be imprudent to do
Well, I'm
otherwise.
sure for an investment of $280 million, Elon's investors are quite happy that it's come out into the billions. I want to jump questions right now. Mr. Secretary, on January 6, 2021, rioters and looters attacked federal law enforcement officials, vandalized and destroyed federal government property, and caused an estimated $2.7 billion in damages right here at the Capitol. Would you have sent the National Guard and the Marines in on that day?
Well, unfortunately, President Trump requested the National Guard in advance, and that was...
It took him quite a long time. I'm asking you, as Secretary of Defense, would you have sent in the National Guard and the Marines on that day? We had 140 Capitol Police officers injured. One died the next day. Would you have sent in the National Guard and the Marines?
As I said, President Trump directed National Guard to be there in advance.
And I think you can look at the record of how long it actually took for him to actually send them in. But it's good to hear that it sounds like you would have sent in the National Guard and the Marines on that day in which the insurrection was taking place right here at the Capitol. Mr. Secretary, during your confirmation hearing, you failed to deny the conclusion that you would carry out an order to shoot protesters in the legs. So let me be direct. Given what we are seeing across the country right now, would you carry out or issue an order by the president for our military to fire upon protesters actively engaging in their civil right to exercise free speech, their First Amendment rights, would you give that order from the president?
I assume you're insinuating what's going on in Los Angeles, and I wouldn't call
Not just
that a
Los
peaceful
Angeles, if we
protest.
take a look at protests throughout the country, it's a simple question. If directed by the president, would you order our military to fire upon protesters? Simple yes or no.
Ma'am, we
Fine.
have, as you know, and as this committee knows, we have standard rules of engagement that are in place that give guidance to our troops, and they abide by them.
I'm asking what you would do. Again, you said you serve at the pleasure of the president. Is that not true?
I do serve at the
So
pleasure.
if the president told you to shoot people in the legs, would you do so? Now, you failed to answer this question as only a confirmation hearing when asked by members of the Senate.
Because I refuse to accept a false hypothetical that's attempting to put me in a corner and make it look like a
At
representation.
a time when we have
of another.
more
We have
Marines and
standard
National
rules of
Guard in Los
engagement and they are
Angeles than
followed.
we do in Syria and Iran alone, I don't think this is a hypothetical. This is an actual situation that we are dealing with right now. So again, I will ask the question, the last 14 seconds I have, would you order our military to shoot at their fellow countrymen if ordered by the president?
I think it's interesting that for 4 years, insurrection was the left's
I think we
favorite
know your
word,
answer. Thank you, Mr.
and
Chair.
that
I
when
yield
it's
back.
invoked in L.A., they were
Gentlelady yields back. Gentlelady's time's expired. The gentleman from Virginia, Mr. McGuire, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to our witnesses for being here today. To all of our men and women who have served or are serving, your mission is important, and we would not have a country without you. Secretary Hegseth, I last saw you at Memorial Day. We really appreciate your remarks as we honored and remembered our fallen. Secretary Hegseth and General Kane, thank you both for being with us here today. General Kane, I'd like to say congratulations to you on your recent confirmation as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. President Trump has put his trust and confidence in two great patriots to lead our men and women in uniform. To me, MAGA, Make America Great Again, means America first. And that's America first, or Make America Great Again for all Americans, regardless of race, religion, or creed. And your policies are working, and day by day, week by week, all Americans are safer at home and abroad. So we commend you for your efforts. If you had a basketball team and you hated your team, you probably wouldn't win any games. And so I love the emphasis, all of us love the emphasis on patriotism and love in our country. Secretary Hegseth, I'd like to also thank you for all that you've done to restore the Department of Defense's focus on lethality and the warrior ethos. Facts don't care about your feelings, and our enemies don't care about our social experiments. A quote from the Commandant of the Marine Corps, I hope I don't mess it up, but he said, quote, "Our job is to stick bayonets in the hearts of our enemies." And these social experiences detract from that mission. I get messages from my Navy SEAL brothers and other veterans all the time applauding the work that you're doing. The distractions of the last 4 years of the Biden administration are finally out of the Department of Defense. DEI, which to me is Marxist, and it stands for didn't earn it, or no longer takes precedence in our military. Merit is once again valued. We're no longer worrying about the gender dysphoria or woke books in our DoD schools and those policies that have been erasing women. Climate change is no longer the concern of the warfighter. And by the way, I'm looking forward to celebrating with you guys on Saturday 250 years of a story that must be told of the U.S. Army. I want to thank President Trump for restoring American history. I know you had to jump through some gymnastics to do it. By returning the names of our bases to many of us called home during our time in service. And thank you and President Trump for showing the United States and the world that we are a nation built on law and order by the department's response in Los Angeles riots. Through your leadership and help of this committee, we will realize peace through strength and our warrior ethos. So Secretary Hegseth, Section 866 of the fiscal year 2025 National Defense Authorization Act directs the Department to submit a strategy to ensure that solid rocket motor programs of record are adequately supported by the domestic industrial base. Yet solid rocket motor production is critical to a variety of systems, like President Trump's Golden Dome we have been lacking. I would say, Mr. Secretary, what progress has the Department made in developing a solid rocket motor industrial base strategy?
Well, I would say in particular, in general, the defense industrial base is a focus of ours. The projectiles and other capabilities being a huge part of that, munitions, but particularly on solid rocket motor projection, I'd have to hand it to my colleague, Bryn, if she has it on that line item. But if it was a priority that this committee identified and that we identified, then you can count on with a 13% increase in this budget, it has been plussed.
Well, we really appreciate that. By the way, in my district, Virginia's 5th congressional district, we applaud what you guys are doing to protect our country. We have a place called ATDM, Accelerated Training and Defense Manufacturing. As I toured the new Columbia submarine and the new Enterprise aircraft carrier, the Secretary of the Navy said the welders have the same level of training as a neurosurgeon. And we don't have enough of those guys, but they're doing that right there in my district. And if your schedule ever permitted to come visit, I'd love to tour that with you folks. And we appreciate all you're doing. So under President Trump's leadership, you said that recruitment is up in the Army, and I think you said all services up. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. I appreciate that. And maybe getting rid of these divisive ideologies and focus on more what unites us has something to do with that. Would you agree with that?
Very much so. It's the leadership from President Trump and the environment they're entering into, which is back to basics.
By the grace of God. And I would say morale amongst our enlisted service members and across our military is up. Would you guys agree with that?
I've seen that.
Yes, sir. The force is united against the problems that we have out there.
Well, we're lucky to have you. Thanks for all you're doing. If we could be of help, reach out anytime. God bless you. I yield back.
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Davis.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being here today, and to General Kane. The radar just lit up. And at that point, we were in an hour-long fight, just trying to kill whatever we could. These were words of a pilot at Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, speaking of a deployment that occurred on April the 13th, 2024 in the Middle East, where pilots shot down rockets, drones, heading to Israel from Iran. Another pilot said, "It was a deployment like we have never seen before." Mr. Secretary, I'm incredibly proud of the airmen at Seymour Johnson Air Force Base. And I was glad to join the ACC commander at a decoration ceremony recognizing 31 of the airmen and what they accomplished, and they accomplished the mission on April the 13th. As you have highlighted the warrior ethos, lethality, and readiness, I cannot think of a better example than what we saw on April the 13th. There was not a lot of time, there was a lot of scrambling. They packed up, took those F-15s to the Middle East, and they got the job done. Seymour Johnson plays a key role in our national defense. It also is a location of the Air Task Force. We have one of our Air Task Force, which aims to generate more efficient, integrated, and deployable units. Mr. Secretary, the Air Force has conveyed a commitment of plans to bring back F-15Es with the 229 engines from Lakenheath. Meanwhile, we're working right here. I'm trying to prioritize operational and maintenance needs at the installation. We also have to come back and address the training needs. In your opening statement, you mentioned NGAD, the F-47. Could you please just briefly expand further in terms of your vision of NGAD and looking long-term at the potential of Seymour Johnson Air Force Base and others to deliver and ensure the nation's continued air superiority in face of growing global threats?
I'll take it briefly and then hand it to the chairman. I have met some of those men and women from April 13th, impressive Americans, some of the refuelers I've had a chance to talk to from that evening. We are investing in NGAD in a historic way, and the F-47, a lot of its capabilities obviously classified, but with a sixth-generation fighter of that type, it shows to our adversaries that we are prepared to project power in the future. And where those go and where they're stationed is an open question, but we're happy to take a look, and I'll hand it to the chairman.
And thanks for speaking with our airmen. Mr. Secretary.
Hey, sir. First, thanks for your service in the Air Force and in the Joint Force as well. You know, just piling on here, that particular day for the Air Force, not just was those Strike Eagle crews, but also the maintainers on the ground who were loading missiles up while there was engagements going on right over their heads. So extraordinary acts of bravery under fire out of your home district there.
Thank you so much. General Kane, thank you, too, for your service. In the opening statement, you shared that you were honored to serve alongside some of the most incredible warriors and civilians and their families. And you didn't stop there, and I appreciate it. You said, I always especially remember our fallen and their families who demonstrate true sacrifice, courage, and commitment to our families. Corporal Ryan Russell was a medic. The 2nd Battalion, Fort Bragg, was killed March the 5th, 2007 in Iraq. I talked to his mother. He was 20 years old, putting a face on this, 20 years old, killed with others about the same age. And she said the only thing she missed the most was his smile. But my question is, we have, for instance, we can't bring back those loved ones, but we have the honor and remember flag. Representative Kiggins, myself, if you could take a look at H.R. 1363, I would ask you to do so. And Mr. Secretary, I would simply ask, what else are we doing to honor our fallen?
We'll take a look at 1363. I will tell you, we initiated the first ever advisory board for Gold Star families at the Defense Department to follow through on their families as well and finding every way possible to recognize.
And I too heard your Memorial Day comments. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you.
We will yield, the gentleman yields back, his time has expired. We will now go to another North Carolinian, Mr. Harrigan, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Secretary Hegseth and Chairman Kane. Thank you all for your testimony today. I'd like to first identify with my colleagues' comments from Wisconsin, but I'd like to take it a step further. I think you all are owed an apology. And although I really wish that all of my Democratic colleagues' comments were of the nature of my colleague from North Carolina just a minute ago, that is not what happened today. And all we saw was flagrant disrespect towards both of you, and that's not what this committee is about. We should be able to disagree without showing disrespect. We should be able to have discourse without sowing discord, and we should be able to question without using words that you can't take back, and that's not what happened today from the other side of this committee. We need to do a lot better than this. But I will say, gentlemen, that you handled those questions with humility and grace. And today, many of my Democratic colleagues have struck out. And it's the second day in a row that many of my Democratic colleagues have struck out. So with that, I've got a couple questions for you today. Mr. Secretary, I want to talk about Army Transformation Initiative. I want to thank you for the bold work that you have done to reshape our nation's Army. Purging our Department of Defense and our Army of legacy weapon systems, force structures, and contracting mechanisms that have not helped us win the last 30 years of war, are not relevant to helping us deter or defeat China, is something that this country desperately needed. It's something that American taxpayers desperately needed. It's something that our servicemen and servicewomen have desperately needed. What is your plan to iterate the Army Transformation Initiative across both our Navy and our Air Forces?
It's a great point. I want to first compliment Army Chief General George, as well as Army Secretary Driscoll, for their initiative out the gate to not waste any time in recognizing precisely what you said, that we need an Army structured and prepared to fight the wars of the future. We owe it to the service, we owe it to the American people. And they followed in large part a Marine Corps that led the way overall in those, as sometimes they do, often. But I recognize other services, the Navy and the Air Force, could do more in that regard as well. Different ships, you might say, to steer than an Army and how you effectuate that modernization or that shift. We think the hard choices we're making in platforms and capabilities in those services mirror the kind of hard choices we're making in the Army, and that's what we see as our job. In this moment right now, considering the threats we face, the world we live in, I'm going to spend, the capital I have to be happy to take the arrows of constituencies or districts, say, no, we're going to put forward what's best for the Army or the Marine Corps or the Navy or the Air Force, and we're going to make the tough calls. And that might create some consternation, and that's okay. But our job is to ensure our budget matches those capabilities. Army transformation is a great example, and we're going to look for it in other services too.
I very much look forward to seeing what you'll have the Navy and the Air Force do, and we'll be behind you 100% of the way. And Chairman Kane, a lot of talk today about the Golden Dome. I don't really fully appreciate some of my Democratic colleagues not knowing what that's about or knowing the threats behind why we have to have the Golden Dome. But I also believe that we have to have mini domes all across our country. As we've seen, we've had very low-cost, high-impact technology proliferate all around the world. And I think we need to look no further than what happened in Ukraine just 2 weeks ago, where you had a $100,000 investment by the Ukrainians scuttle over $7 billion worth of hardware by the Russians. I think that we have to look forward into the future and anticipate that we may face the exact same threats, maybe not against our military, but against our infrastructure, against our stadiums, against our city centers, and we need mini domes to protect this country against those threats. How are you all working that problem set?
Well, sir, first, thanks for the question. Thanks for your service. One of the things that we're learning is the nature and way we fight wars is changing. We're starting to face, as you're alluding to, problems of mass, where numbers of exchanges, kinetic exchanges, and frankly non-kinetic in the cyber domain are increasing exponentially. So we have to match networks with networks and mass with mass. And so as we move forward to create the force of the future, that's on our radar.
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. Cisneros.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, so many topics to cover. I represent California's 31st District, located in Southern California, where you've deployed the National Guard and Marine Combat Battalion in an effort by this administration to provoke a confrontation. God only knows for what reason. As my colleague from Tennessee mentioned, the military has been activated before by the president, but let's tell the whole story. President Johnson federalized the troops after the governor of Alabama activated them to keep black students out of the University of Alabama. President Johnson did it so the students could attend the university. He did it for the right reason. He corrected a wrong. California did not ask the president for help, and the presence of the military is an effort by this administration to intimidate and incite fear and violence amongst its citizens. You failed at ensuring basic operational security by sharing classified data over an unclassified network. This was blatant, lazy, and put service members' lives at risk. And knowing that your office is a SCIF, I hope you are not bringing in your devices, your personal cell phone, or even your work phone, because that's not supposed to be in there either, right, your cell phone, into your office to send these signal chat texts. Your blatant lack of basic OPSEC would have gotten you forced you to resign from any other administration. You're requiring 8% cuts across all services, not to save the taxpayers' money, but to fund President Trump's pet projects. You talk about quality of life for our service members, but yet you take $1 billion away from the Army that was meant to improve their barracks and their living. You said that money is waste, but we don't know that yet because we haven't seen a budget. If the president has projects he wants funding for, you need to come before this body and provide reasoning, not just shift money around. Right now, you are stealing from our service members, robbing Peter to pay Paul. Now you have repeatedly said that you will judge every individual on their merit. Is that true?
Unlike the previous administration,
you will
yes,
judge
we are focusing
simple yes
on,
or no.
For our service
Judge
members,
everybody
how
on their
good they
merit.
are at their job, yes.
But yet you are separating thousands of service members who are performing and doing their job at a high level. They are being separated not based on merit. You know, some of them have been recommended for early promotion and have gotten awards and are doing a great job. But you are separating for no other reason, and frankly, I think you just don't like them. And you are classifying many of them as a national security threat, which is simply not true. You asked the Secretary of the Navy to change the name of a ship, because Harvey Milk didn't meet your definition of warrior ethos. If a Korean War veteran and a Navy diver who gave his life for standing up for his beliefs doesn't meet your definition, I don't know what will. You keep talking about recruiting, but let's face the facts here, right? Recruiting started improving before President Trump even came into office, and the reason that changed was because of the investment that was put into recruiting. Now, I was at the Pentagon at the time, and I know how much we invested in it, and I know how much of the services. And when you take away that investment, you're going to get exactly what happened in President Trump's first administration. In 2019, we had the same recruiting crisis that, back in 2019 when he was president the first time. You continue to attack diversity, but I have always said diversity is about creating opportunity. And I have seen plenty of individuals, many of them enlisted members, who when given the opportunity have succeeded, not because of their sex, not because of color, not because of their sexual identity, but because of their worth ethic and merit. Mr. Secretary, when using your definition of DEI, I think there's only one individual at the Pentagon right now who got his job based on that merit, and that is you, and you got it because of sucking up to your boss. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Indiana, Mr. Mesmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Secretary Hegseth and General Kane, for being here today. Secretary Hegseth, I'd like to start by following up on some questioning from Mr. Desjardins this morning regarding SLCM. I really appreciate your response regarding the importance of the program. I want to add my voice to the chorus of those who believe the SLCM is a vitally important program, and I'm looking forward to the budget boost that you mentioned for its development and deployment. Is there anything else you'd like to add about your view of the importance of investing in the SLCM program?
No, nothing to add to what I said previous. I think it's an important part of the dynamic battlefield of the future to continue to maintain the proper level of deterrence.
Excellent, thank you. General Kane, in response to a question in front of the Appropriations Subcommittee on Defense about non-strategic nuclear capabilities, you spoke about the 4 Cs across enterprise that you also mentioned here this morning. I'd like to focus my question on the competition piece. General Kane and Secretary Hegseth, can you elaborate on the strategy related to competition in the department? And would you agree that in general, the department achieves better outcomes on programs when it engages industry in a competitive process?
Yes, sir. Absolutely, we do. I mean, there's many case studies over the arc of the last 30, 40 years that show how the taxpayer gets a better deal, the warrior gets a better deal when multiple entrants come to the table to drive better outcomes out of each of those producers. And as we look at the House's efforts, the Senate's efforts to work together along with the department and the other leadership to generate the national and defense industrial base of the future, I really hope we encourage competition, not just with the existing primes, but new entrants and even startups. I spent some time in the private sector as an entrepreneur and realized quickly the value of competition to get to better outcomes.
Outstanding. Secretary?
To echo the chairman, I think we're at a special moment where a lot of younger, scrappier, dynamic companies want to enter into the market, and our job is to open that up so that not just the big guys who have mostly defense-related industries at this point, not as much of a commercial base in some cases, that aperture is widened to those other smaller, medium-sized companies that invest a lot of their own money in R&D in the hopes that they can cross the valley of death and actually participate in larger systems. So we want a lot more competition.
Excellent, thank you. Are you considering an open competition process for development of the SLCM missile system?
I don't know the particulars of the competitive process of the SLCM, but we can get that to you.
Okay, that'd be great, thank you. Secretary Hegseth, on the HACD subcommittee hearing, you also mentioned our AUKUS partnership and how you've been working with Minister Marles and Secretary Haley, not only relying upon the previous administration's Pillar 2 framework, but also finding new ways to supercharge Pillar 2 and setting up new signature programs under the AUKUS framework. What are the best capabilities in the near term that AUKUS Pillar 2 can deliver to our warfighters?
Well, I don't want to get ahead of our discussions with Marls and Healy in Australia and UK in particular, but they're ongoing, they're recent, and with an interest in identifying precisely those projects that we share a mutual interest in, that are a part of our future fight, where all of our defense industrial bases can contribute and benefit from collaboration. So we are looking for that, and we will.
Excellent. Would you anticipate hypersonic capabilities, like a hypersonic glide vehicle or new electronic warfare systems, could be a potential programs that AUKUS could focus on delivering?
I think you were at our meeting, sir.
Oh, okay.
No, long-range fires is something we've definitely been a part of our conversations.
Okay, excellent. Secretary Hegseth and General Kane, we know that China is developing new technologies at an alarming pace, namely hypersonic weapons. The previous administration sadly did not seem to understand the gravity of this situation and did not prioritize funding for our missile defense and hypersonic programs. Can you speak about the Trump administration's and your department's views about the importance of prioritizing investment in hypersonic and missile defense?
Well, sir, I'll defer to the prioritization to my civilian leadership. What I'm trying to create as a global integrator, along with the incredible work by the Joint Chiefs and the services, is the mix of capabilities that we need to include hypersonics and other long-range fires to achieve the effects at the tactical edge so that we can win in the future and continue to win the way we do now.
Thank you. Yield back my time.
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair now recognizes the gentlelady from New Hampshire, Ms. Goodlander.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to our witnesses for being here today. We have one really important thing in common. We all swore an oath to this great document, the United States Constitution. We swore that oath when we joined the military, and we swore that oath when we began the jobs that we're holding now. And I want to begin at the beginning of this document and at the beginning of your testimony, Mr. Hegseth. In the first sentence of your testimony, you said you're here today to testify about the fiscal year 2026 budget for the Department of Defense. You're required under law to submit this budget to the Congress, because we've got the power of the purse after all, by no later than the first Monday in February. Here we are in the second Thursday in June. We don't have your budget, as the chairman, the ranking member, and many of my colleagues on this committee have pointed out. You have testified that you want to be accountable for every dollar, every taxpayer dollar, and where it goes. We can't do our job without your budget. When can we expect your budget, Mr. Hegseth?
Well, as I also acknowledged in my opening remarks, in the first year of an administration, it does take more
Mr.
time,
Hegseth, please
especially while
reclaiming
you're
my
addressing
time.
the priorities of the previous administration.
When can we expect your budget?
You have details of it already, and you will have it very soon.
Can we expect the budget before the end of the month?
I would refer to Bryn, who's working that, but I know there are a great deal of detail that is already with the committee.
Okay, let the record reflect that you haven't given us a commitment, but you're required by law to do so. You're also required by law to pass an audit. That's been true since the 1990s. The Department of Defense is the only department that has continually failed an audit. You've committed to passing an audit in 2028, but we expect you to pass an audit this year, and hope you will work with us to achieve that goal. Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you for your testimony and what you've said about the threats that we face as the United States, threats from China, Russia, and Iran, and I want to ask briefly questions about each. Mr. Chairman, you've said that the Chinese Communist Party is advancing an unprecedented military modernization effort with cutting-edge technologies, including artificial intelligence. Do you agree that the United States military must have more powerful AI capabilities than China?
Well, ma'am, first, thank you also for your service in the Navy. I think LLMs and AI really underpinning all of our command and control capabilities is now and will be in the future a key and essential tool for decision making.
Thank you. I agree that American AI dominance is extremely important.
Yes,
Mr. Hegseth, should American AI dominance be up for negotiation with China and any trade talks that are underway?
As the chairman said, we're very focused on AI dominance. It's central to maintaining our cutting edge, and we're doing that.
Good. Well, I hope, will you commit to telling the president not to sacrifice American AI dominance in any of his negotiations with the Chinese?
The president is not surrendering any of our dominance to the Chinese.
Good, I'll take that as a yes, that you'll be advocating for that. Thank you very much. I hope you'll also, you've both spoken to the importance of competition in the defense industrial base. I agree with that deeply. I'd point out that 40% of small businesses have left our defense industrial base supply chain in the past decade, and trade wars that have caused unprecedented uncertainty are going to drive more small businesses out of business. And that's something I hope we can work together to try to prevent, because it's very real in my home state of New Hampshire. Mr. Hegseth, did you order a pause in offensive cyber operations against Russia?
I know the story you're referring to, and it's false. We said it then, and I'll say it now.
So it is your testimony that you never ordered a pause in offensive cyber operations against Russia?
We did not.
Okay, let the record reflect that, and we'll be following up on that. I'm going to skip Iran because there's been a lot said in this hearing that has given me grave concern. One of the things that's been said in this hearing, Mr. Hegseth, was I want to give you the opportunity to correct the record and make clear that you will abide by, that you will obey a ruling of the United States Supreme Court.
I don't believe we have any cases pending before the Supreme Court right now.
I want to ask you, will you abide by a ruling, by a decision of the United States Supreme Court if it is issued and you're asked to do so?
What I've said, and I'll repeat, is that district courts should not set the foreign policy of the United States of America.
Mr. Hegseth, this is a fundamental principle of the United States Constitution.
Gentlelady's time's expired. Chair, now recognize the gentleman from Kansas, Mr. Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Secretary General, thank you for being here and for your extensive commitment of time today. We're grateful for it, and it's the way the system is supposed to work. I want to ask Mr. Secretary on the service member and family health care side. In your opening statement, we haven't talked much about it today, but you brought up quality of life improvements made in partnership with Congress over the prior years and going forward, and your commitment to them. And I jotted down what you said, which is that quality of care given by defense healthcare system is an important priority for you. At the end of the last year, prior to the current administration's service in office, there was concern in many base towns, Army base towns, about what we viewed as a push from the Biden administration to downgrade a number of our healthcare facilities. I represent, among others, Fort Riley, for example, and we were very concerned about the future of Irwin Army Hospital. We thought we had that sidetracked, and perhaps we do. But we've heard some concern sort of bubbling up again that perhaps DHA's taking another look. And I just want to be sure that it's on your radar screen. We understand some of the resource deployment issues, and with respect to Irwin in particular, it's a wonderful facility. I don't know if you had a chance to be out, but we'd invite you to come out to Fort Riley or Fort Leavenworth or both. Irwin's a state-of-the-art physical facility. One of the challenges is that the physical plant is underutilized. One of the ways we have attempted to respond to that on my watch, which is now 5 months old, is to work with the command staff and his team at Riley to connect them with appropriate high-grade civilian providers in the area to try to bring more specialty capacity there, to look at other ways to fully utilize that capacity for our service members, their families, veterans in the area, perhaps others, maybe be creative. We want to grow our way out of any back-of-the-envelope challenges. We don't want to shrink our way out of it. So I wanted to be sure to bring that to your attention. I guess I would ask, do we have cause to be concerned? Or can we at least have an assurance that if there is cause to be concerned, you're going to take another look at this and engage us fully before we have any surprises?
Well, we will certainly take a look. In particular, I will say that we're increasing our expenditures on the healthcare side to make sure we're addressing the needs properly. We're also willing to get creative, and one of those, it's not precisely what you addressed, is working with VA. I mentioned it earlier in this hearing, where there's places we can cross-level in a mutually beneficial way that ensures the throughput necessary and skill sets necessary of different facilities. That makes sense also. But looking to the civilian side is another alternative. So I don't know if Bryn, you have particulars on that facility, but we'll get more information to you.
Appreciate that, Mr. Secretary, and if there's something else I need to know now, I'll take it. Otherwise, maybe we can follow up with you. But we want to get creative. It's a great asset, and for Riley in particular, as you know, it's an old cavalry post that, not unlike Fort Carson, from my colleague to the right here, provides a relatively large maneuver space in the middle of the country. You can't get that back. We want it to survive and thrive in a 21st century warfighting environment, and in order to do that, we've got to make sure we're doing the small things that are critical. Including providing the right kind of health care to our troops. It's a great family post, by the way. So, let me ask you, shifting gears a bit, and I don't know if this is appropriate for the Secretary or the General, I'd direct it to your discretion, but with respect to sort of the future of the E-7, another issue that we have some Kansas-based interest in, but obviously we're more interested more broadly in what we're going to do for aerial surveillance assets. There's been some discussion that the E-7 might be under consideration for reconsideration going forward, and some talk about perhaps the E-2 being a bridging platform. What can you tell us about the thinking there, and in particular, what level of confidence do you have that the E-2 has the capacity to do the Indo-PACOM operations that we need to be able to do? It's a long distance.
I would file the E-7 under the tough choices file for us, for sure. Our assessment is that it was gold-plated, it was late, and it was over cost. And if we look at the future fight, extending the E-2D is our view alongside, we believe that space-based ISR is the capability of the future. Not a prospective, hopeful future, but the technologies are there to begin to deliver even more robustly than an aerial platform. So our budget does reflect those tough choices.
Can the E-2 do what we need it to do over the Pacific?
Well, we know that the E-7 being late to cost may not make it in time, and that's part of the consideration that we're looking at.
Understood. Mr. Chairman, I yield back. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Gentleman yields back, Chair, and I recognize the gentlelady from Maryland, Ms. Elfreth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses today. I want to echo first my colleagues and their concerns surrounding a number of issues, including the deployment of Marines to Los Angeles, the importance of supporting our ally in Ukraine, the alarming security breach that was Signalgate, and the unjust termination of members of our military from diverse backgrounds who simply want to serve our nation. But before I get to my questions, Mr. Secretary, I want to just follow up on my colleague from New Hampshire. Setting aside district courts, do you believe you have the authority to defy a Supreme Court ruling, yes or no?
We're not here to defy a Supreme Court ruling.
Okay, I'll take that as a win. I'm going to move on to cybercom in my state. Mr. Secretary, earlier this year, General Hawk was relieved of his command of cybercom and NSA following a tweet that accused him of being disloyal to the president. And the oath that you took, the oath that I took, does not demand loyalty to any president, but to this Constitution. I too brought my copy from college with me. And yet, as of this date, General Hawk, his successor has not yet been named, and you've stated many times that lethality of the military is critical, so it's difficult to understand how this administration would allow any billet to remain unfilled, especially those who lead our combatant commands. I join my colleague, Congressman Bacon, in my grave concern that both the firing and the delay in hiring of a leader of cybercom only gives assurance and comfort to our adversaries. So I'm sure you would agree that any combatant command cannot be at its most lethal if a commander remains absent. When will the president announce the new commander of cybercom?
I would note there's a very highly capable deputy there, so it's
Absolutely,
not adrift at all. We recognize that, and we are in the process of ensuring that slot is filled.
In the next month, 2 months, 3 months?
It will not be that long.
Okay, I appreciate that. General Kane, during your confirmation process, you stated that the dual hat arrangement provides the ability to look across both organizations and has empowered both U.S. Cybercom and the NSA to fulfill their missions better than each could do alone. Can you confirm for this committee that you hold that view to this day, and in one sentence or less speak to the importance of that dual hat arrangement?
Yeah, that reflects the current policy of the administration. The Secretary, of course, as does the President, reserves the right to rethink that. Both organizations are critical, and whether they're a single or dual hat relationship, if directed, we'll take a look at the risk associated with each one of them and come back to our civilian leaders with those risks and let them make a decision on it.
But you are in the room, are you not, advising the President as what is best for our national security?
I am in the room, yeah.
And can you commit to,
Yeah.
I agree, can you commit to continuing your advocacy for that dual hat relationship?
After some analysis, at the time, I wasn't even in the military, I was still coming back in.
Okay.
So if directed to take a look at it, we'll carefully, ma'am, measure the goods and others of each of those. But you have my commitment that I'll continue as I have, giving my candid, forthright military advice on the eaches and others of all those to Secretary
I
of the
appreciate
NSC
that.
and the President.
Thank you, sir. I want to move on to sexual assault in the military, and it remains a stain on this DOD and this entire nation. It erodes cohesion. It brings a lifetime of pain and recovery for victims, including my constituents. It's important to members of this committee that funding for SAPR in particular increases, and that any flatline of that funding would be viewed as a decrease. In preparation for and during your confirmation, Mr. Secretary, you made commitments that you would support a robust sexual assault program and response program that, quote, seeks to drive sexual assaults in the military down to zero. I commend you for that commitment. I agree with it. And yet, has been brought up many times, we have no budget by which to measure your commitment and your promises. So can you commit to today that when we do at last receive your final FY26 budget, we will see an increase to SAPR funding and a plan from you as to how to drive sexual assaults down to zero?
As I said in my confirmation, I applaud Congress for the efforts that have been ongoing to address that issue, which we do need to drive to zero. That funding has not been reduced. We've looked at a lot of places for efficiencies. That has not been one, and I think you've seen the same news I have, that thankfully sexual assaults are coming down, and we continue to want to do that.
But we have to remain ever vigilant, which is why I hope it's not level funded. I hope we can continue to drive that down, so I look forward to that final budget whenever we do receive it. Lastly, and I'll take this for the record, moving on to a similar topic, which is rape kits for DoD civilians overseas. In April, DHA issued a memo denying DoD non-beneficiary civilians who are victims of sexual assault and rape access to sexual assault evidence collection kits. If I could get for the record your explanation for this decision. These civilians support the DoD. It's incredibly important that we find and bring justice to those victims, and I look forward to working with you on it. And I'll yield back my time, Mr. Chair.
Gentlelady's time's expired, Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Crank.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Secretary, and General, thank you for being here. And I want to first kind of apologize for the sort of personal attacks. My mom and dad taught me to be different. You won't get that from me, Mr. Secretary. Secretary Hegseth and General Kane, we've heard multiple times this year that we can't do Golden Dome because it'll just cause China and Russia to build better missiles to get around our defenses. For that logic to make sense, it'd mean that China and Russia aren't already advancing missile technology and have stood pat on the missile technology they had 20 or 30 years ago. I founded the Golden Dome Caucus here in the House. Is that an accurate statement that they have stood pat on missile technology, or are they advancing our enemies on missile technology?
I think it's fair to say, like us, they're attempting to advance in every way possible.
Secretary Hegseth, El Paso County is the fastest growing county in Colorado. It's projected to see significant population growth over the next 3 decades, and we're proud that the region's become such a desirable place for families, but that growth has to be balanced with protecting critical operations of our 5 military installations, and that's why initiatives like Security, Open Space, and Agriculture Resiliency, or SOAR, initiatives are so important. Through a combination of private funding, USDA's Regional Conservation Partnership Program, and the Department of Defense's Readiness and Environmental Protection Integration Program, or REPI, this initiative supports targeted land acquisitions near military bases. These efforts help conserve wildlife, habitat, preserve agricultural interests, and of course maintain the necessary buffer zone, the most important part, that allows military missions to continue. Does the Department of Defense plan to continue to support the REPI program in the FY26 budget request to Congress?
Yes, sir, it does. I could get back to you with a specific number.
That would be great. Thank you. Additionally, the Colorado Trust for Public Land has been awarded an $18.5 million USDA RCPP grant to help leverage DoD REPI funds and reduce future land use conflicts around installations like the U.S. Air Force Academy. However, I understand the USDA is currently holding the funds under review. While I recognize this may fall outside of your direct jurisdiction, the success of this land acquisition is essential to protecting the Academy's training capabilities. Can I count on your assistance in working with USDA to find a solution that protects the readiness of the Air Force Academy and responsible federal funding?
Yeah, we're happy to look at that with you.
Great, thank you. I also would like to talk a little bit about the border. My district is home to U.S. Northern Command. We're very proud of what U.S. Northern Command has done with the new authorities that on January 20th the President gave Northern Command on the southern border. And in addition, 4th ID has troops down there. Could you talk a bit about some of the great work that the U.S. military is doing in support of securing our southern border?
We think it's foundational and fundamental work to the security of our nation. And as I've said before, because the previous administration allowed 21 million illegals from places we don't know to enter our country. And thank you for asking that, because it gives me an opportunity to sort of, I see questions that are specifically meant to attempt to sow discord between the chairman and I, knowing you're going to get different answers based on our positions. And he has said, the technicalities of an invasion, well, we're not talking about an invading army here. So of course everyone's trying to spin his words. What we're talking about is the invasion of human beings, mostly military-age males from all around the world. We have no idea what their intentions are, and they facilitated it under the previous administration. So me in my position, I can I can clearly state that it is an invasion. And we are proud to have the military at the border to interdict that. And they're every single day, through increased authorities, are working together with Border Patrol to ensure that that number goes from 99.9% to 100 at the southern border. I cannot commend the Joint Staff, NORTHCOM, and our military for reacting to that in the early days of the administration, orienting their focus to the southern border, and applying the manpower expertise necessary, because for 2 decades, we spent 20 years guarding other people's borders, and we got really good at it. And it's about time we take that expertise and apply it to ours. And I commend our military for following those lawful orders and executing it incredibly well.
They did a great job, and it's very similar to what's happening right now in Los Angeles. It's a support role. They're not down there arresting people. They're not doing that, but they're doing a great job supporting. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I'd yield back.
Thank you. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Whitesides.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman and Mr. Secretary, thank you for your service to the country. I'm a new member of Congress from the north side of Los Angeles, and I'm proud to represent a region with both a large veteran community and a world-class aerospace production base. It was our area that broke the speed of sound for the first time, that assembled the space shuttles, and that now builds many of the most advanced aircraft that this nation depends on for its national security. I want to start by communicating my deep concern for the deployment of military troops to the streets of Los Angeles County. Over the past few days, I've received briefings from military leadership, including the Marine Corps and the National Guard, and one thing is eminently clear. So far, this operation has been poorly planned and poorly executed, and is not an example of the operational and logistical excellence that the Department of Defense is famous for. Our service members have been sleeping on the concrete floors of federal buildings and even outside on roads. No contract has been made to feed them or adequately house them. NORTHCOM was not given adequate time or resources to prepare to absorb these Guard units. The lines of command are muddy at best. I've personally heard that NORTHCOM is the lead agency, the DHS is the lead agency, that the FBI is the lead agency, or that your office, Mr. Secretary, is the lead agency. It's unclear whether the Marines who have been deployed have even completed their full training for this civilian-focused, non-lethal mission. The briefings that we have received to date indicate that only a fraction of the assigned forces are actually being utilized on a day-to-day basis. On top of this, yesterday we heard in your testimony, Mr. Secretary, that the department may start sending troops to other cities and states. And early today, you refused to say whether you would follow the decision of the Supreme Court on the legality of the deployments of the National Guard and the Marines. We're on an extraordinarily dangerous path. The nation's founding fathers were rightfully deeply skeptical of domestic deployment of federal troops. That skepticism stretches all the way back to the Boston Massacre and is a skepticism based on blood. Going forward, I would urge you to avoid politics and to actually pay attention to what law enforcement officers are saying on the ground. Now, we've talked a lot today about leadership and accountability. I've been lucky to work for several inspiring leaders. When I was NASA Chief of Staff, my boss was Administrator Charlie Bolden, who you may know, served as a decorated Marine General, as well as a Space Shuttle Commander. This was a Marine who flew more than 100 combat missions in North and South Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. He commanded the mission which deployed the Hubble Space Telescope, which at the time was the largest object ever deployed by the shuttle. He's a serious man and an American hero. I haven't been a member of the Armed Services Committee for very long, just over 5 months, but in that time I've had the privilege to meet and talk with the senior-most members of our military. I've met men and women who've served for decades in our armed services, who've served for years in combat zones. What have I learned from these American heroes? Leaders don't just speak, they listen. They are strong, but they show humility. They are curious, and they learn from all members of their team, even people that they disagree with. You and your team have made multiple serious errors, putting our pilots and troops at risk by disclosing operational details in unclassified communication channels, firing general officers with unique experience and leadership skills, hiring senior team members who seem to be unable to work together well and who seem unable to hold confidential information private. We need the Department of Defense to be run well, so that our troops are led well and our nation is protected. In order for that to happen, Mr. Secretary, I suspect you will need to listen more and talk less. You will need to be more curious and capable of learning from different voices. I know that that is not the style of this administration, but you now have the lives of millions of service members and hundreds of millions of Americans depending on your capacity to learn and change. I sincerely hope you can do it, and I yield back my time.
Thank you. The chair now recognizes 5 minutes for myself. I have the privilege and honor of representing a district that has a huge Navy presence, so I want to switch gears and talk a little bit about naval aviation. Although I am the daughter of a Green Beret who served in Vietnam, I had the privilege of serving for 10 years as a helicopter pilot. I'm married to a 20-year veteran who flew F-18s. I'm now a proud mom of a naval aviator and a son who graduated from VMI about 3 weeks ago. So big military family, and I represent a district where naval aviation, really the heart of East Coast Naval Aviation is the East Coast Master Jet Base. Yesterday we spent some time talking about the importance of the East Coast. I understand the importance of the West Coast very much in this potential China fight that we are all thinking of every day. But it can't be understated, the value of what the East Coast brings and our battle groups and our carrier strike groups that deploy, the people that live in my district. So it's a little bit disheartening when I read about and think about the future of naval aviation when I hear from the Department of Defense that about $500 million that was appropriated for the next generation strike fighter in the form of FAXX is to be reallocated to the Air Force. And then when I read memos from this committee is unaware of any changes to the Navy's requirements justifying the procurement of FAXX and continues to support efforts to award the FAXX development and design contract to the Navy. So we're trying to piece together, and I asked the same question yesterday, and I echo the comments of my colleague from Virginia, Congressman Whitman, but that piece is very important. Right now, I house very aging F-18 squadrons. There's no prioritizing, no commitment from the Navy to give me even F-35 squadrons. I have 4 F-35 squadrons that the Marine Corps has on the East Coast. But you all know better than anybody that putting all your eggs in one basket is one of the worst strategies. I've got the West Coast, Naval Air Station Lemoore, West Coast Master Jet Base. Looks great. We've been out there to visit just to compare. They're slated to have, I believe, 8 F-35 squadrons, and there's even an F-35 Center for Development that they want, or Center for Excellence that they want to put there, with no mention of the East Coast Master Jet Base. So I just want to hear from you all. I'll start with you, Secretary Hegseth, but could you explain a little bit about your comments, why that is, and what your plans are to be supportive of our East Coast Master Jet Base that is equally, if not more important?
I think it's a fair point. I do think it's equally important. On the FAXX, we are reviewing it, no doubt, it's fair to say. The budget does provide for a completion of the design. As I've stated, the F-47, the EDGAD program is the priority in this budget to get that moving. So we are invested in 6th gen, and we do recognize the Navy's unique power projection capabilities. The F-35 factors into that also, and so we're looking at its development in the future, and we'll take into consideration those options and certainly make sure as we're planning it's considered.
That base needs it, and General Kane, I'd love to hear your thoughts too. To quote you, you said, we need a capability that is mobile. There's nothing more mobile than a United States
Yes, ma'am.
aircraft carrier. And when I turn on the television, we want to talk about dropping bombs on Houthis in Yemen. Who do they show? They always show my husband taking off F-18s. I get very jealous. I know there's a helicopter over there in Starboard D just waiting for
Yes,
something to
ma'am.
happen, but
Ready
that's who
to
they
fish.
show. It's naval aviation.
Ready to fish somebody out of the water. Ma'am, thanks for the question. Thanks for your service. Thanks for your husband's service, and congratulations to your son. That's a big deal. You know, obviously the Navy's working all those issues, East Coast, West Coast power, but, you know, as a global integrator, having 5th gen on the West Coast that can go in those carrier air groups and get out there and provide deterrence and/or capabilities is key. You know, echo the Secretary's comments. I'll get with the Navy and take a look at their force array in terms of 5th gen and moving forward. And of course, the FAXX timing is a policy decision, so defer to my leadership.
Thank you. Well, I also I know that you all are aware of our work we did from this last Congress, with the quality of life initiatives and for the infrastructure needs at our bases. But that base is hurting. And again, that is our East Coast master jet base. And we all know money follows the new toys sometimes. So please think of that, and please prioritize, at least give us a commitment that is coming our way. And in closing, I just want to talk about, I'm the co-chair of Women, Peace, and Security Caucus, which we have here. We've had here, this was a 2017 Trump bill that was signed into law, co-sponsored them by Senator Marco Rubio, strongly championed by Ivanka Trump. It's designed to improve military readiness, strengthen our allies, promote lasting stability through the inclusion of women in peace and security efforts. Just please be mindful of that. It's a cheap $3 million in fiscal year 24, but having been in a lot of meetings with a lot of our allied partners, it's a cheap form of just maintaining those relationships and really giving a role to the roles that women want to play. I mean, it's an important role for us. I will say that we are watching. Women are watching. And as a person who was commissioned in 1993, which was the first year that women could fly in combat, it was an important piece in my decision to serve. So I just would love to hear your thoughts about the future of women, peace, and security.
Ma'am, my issue is not what women, peace, and security was, it's what it became under the Biden administration. So our review showed that what it became, which is far more ideologically focused, was not what it should be. And so our decision there was driven by removing that aspect.
I don't disagree, and happy to be a part of the solution to fix that. And my time has expired, and the chair now recognizes Senator from California. Mr.
Got promoted.
I'm sorry.
Thank you, Chairwoman.
Sorry about that.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Thank you to the witnesses for being here. Mr. Secretary, I just got word that Senator Padilla from my great state of California was physically assaulted and arrested for attending Secretary Noem's press event. The mere fact that he showed up, he was forcibly removed. Is this how you would treat a member of Congress who attends your press event, whether invited or not?
Well, I've been here for 5 hours, sir. I don't know about that.
I'm just asking, would you have me forcibly removed from your press event
I'm not going
if
to
I walked in?
speculate on a hypothetical. I'm sure there's more context.
I'll take that as a yes. Mr. Secretary, does the DOD have any plans to allow the military to follow the orders of President Trump when his order violates the Constitution? Yes or no?
I reject the premise of that question, which is that President Trump is ordering unconstitutional orders.
I'll take that as a yes as well. Mr. Secretary, the deployment of active duty Marines to California is incredibly disruptive to the lives of service members who are being drawn into the President's publicity stunt. And I want to know how you're planning to take care of these troops. So will you commit to sending my office and this committee a detailed plan on how you plan to house and feed the 700 Marines and potentially thousands of Marines?
What's disruptive is when concrete blocks are thrown at the heads of ICE officers. And so we're proud that National Guardsmen and Marines have responded in real time to help defend those federal law enforcement officers.
So do you have a plan? Do you have a plan to house
Not only do we have a plan, but it's been a focus of mine. I've held a riot shield before in a riot. I recognize what it means to respond in real time without enough time.
Mr. Secretary, will you get me that plan,
everything they can as fast as they can, and we have a plan for that.
Mr. Secretary, I reclaim my plan. Chairwoman, LA Mayor Bass stated that the area placed under the recent curfew is around 1 square mile. Is that the same area where service members will be deployed?
Service members are in Los Angeles to defend law enforcement, ICE agents, and facilities.
So essentially, you're telling me that American people that a 1 square mile block of LA, and for the record, LA County is over 4,700 square miles, warrants the deployment of 700 Marines and the federalization of 4,000 California National Guardsmen. You testified earlier that you will send in the military to protect local law enforcement. Did LAPD Police Chief McDonnell ask you for your help?
I read reports on a regular basis.
Did he ask for your help?
From ICE agents who
I'll take that as a no.
more grateful.
Did
for the
LA
fact that
Sheriff
there are
Luna
soldiers
ask
that are
for you
helping
to
do
send in
their
the
job?
military, Mr. Secretary? Did LA Sheriff Luna ask you to send in the military? Yes or no?
I don't work for the LA Sheriff, sir.
Well, you said you sent them in to support the military, but they didn't even ask for your, to support law enforcement, but they didn't even ask for your help. Have you been to Los Angeles in the last 7 days?
My team is, from the top down, focused on making sure Los Angeles
I'll also
is,
take that as a no. How did you arrive at the decision not to coordinate with local law enforcement and the governor's office on the initial deployment?
It would be great if the governor attempted to actually coordinate instead of grandstand.
All right, so I believe you're secretly deploying troops to an area without coordinating with local officials is somehow not disruptive and to the logistical and operational conditions on the ground. You agree with that?
I would need you to repeat the question, sir.
Does the department plan on coordinating with Governor Newsom's office on local law enforcement going forward, Mr. Secretary?
We've coordinated with local law enforcement quite well, but the governor's been an obstruction to that, of course.
All right, Secretary Hegseth, this political stunt, and by your own admission, is expected to cost the American taxpayer at least $134 million and will disrupt the lives of hundreds and potentially thousands of active duty Marines and 4,000 National Guardsmen. That's $134 million and thousands of personnel diverted away from critical missions in the Indo-Pacific, where China is rapidly expanding from Europe, where NATO needs US support amid growing Russian aggression, and from CENTCOM, where tensions are escalating so critically that your own General Kurilla had to cancel all his testimony in Congress today. Your redirection of combat-ready troops from real-world national security threats to manage a domestic protest is gross mismanagement and a slap in the face of service members whose lives are disrupted throughout this event. As a veteran myself, it's a disgrace, and you should be ashamed. I yield back.
The gentleman's
Madam
time
Chair,
has expired.
Madam Chair, can we add into record, please, that the gentleman from California has just stated that it is okay to have 1 mile of complete criminality in LA so long as it doesn't cover the 4700.
That was not my statement.
Madam Chair, that it's okay.
Mr. Mills has not been recognized.
This is absolutely
Either gentleman,
absurd.
either gentleman is recognized.
Have the right to over to the, you have not been recognized.
Either
by
gentleman
the
is
chair.
recognized. The chair now
And neither
recognizes
controls
the
the
congressman
time. And
from Louisiana, Mr. Higgins, for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Let's bring it down a notch, shall we? It's always fascinating to observe folks talking about things they've never experienced with a great deal of authority up in this bizarre body, reading scripted, hateful, planned rhetoric and directing them at you gentlemen, who do indeed know what it is to stand a post. But let me address first to General Kane. I have to say, good sir, that researching your service career, my goodness gracious, 35 years of distinguished, exceptional service. I can't imagine that there's a better American man to be the chairman of our Joint Chiefs of Staff. Thank you, good sir. As an enlisted Army grunt, I thank you for being where you are and for your 35 years of service. Mr. Secretary and General, I have plenty of questions that I don't have to get to because you're almost finished with this thing. I have questions on recruitment and training and Fort Polk and software modernization, artificial intelligence, shipbuilding. our new Army rifles, which I find questionable, by the way. But when I met with you in the Pentagon a couple of months ago, Mr. Secretary, to dive deep into the reconciliation considerations and the budget, what the DOD would need, and primary threats facing our country, I'd never really sat down with you like that before, but what struck me, good sir, was that you are a committed and dedicated patriot, and I know that I can expect that sort of transparency and accessibility and candor from your office. So I'll get to these questions down the line. I know you'll answer the phone and your people will respond, because that's a man that you are. You've covered a tremendous amount today, and you've been subjected to some politically motivated vitriol. On behalf of Congress, I apologize for that. So let me just state that from my humble position, I'm going to make a promise to you two gentlemen, and by extension to the country that we love and serve. Whatever you need to accomplish your missions, we're going to work very hard to provide. May God give you strength, and may He provide shields of protection and peace for your families. I know your nights are long. You probably each working 20-hour days every day. Thank you for that, for being here today, for your accessibility. May God bless you each. Madam Chair, I yield.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Vindeman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I ask unanimous consent to submit for the record an article. A distinguished member of this committee,
without objection, so ordered,
confirmed that there was, in fact, a pause in offensive cyber operations earlier this year. The SecDef just denied this. This committee deserves to know whether the Secretary just lied. Mr. Secretary, many believed you were underqualified for this role. You've been Secretary for 4.5 months now. For the sake of the American people and our service members, I hope you've done your homework since. Let's talk Indo-PACOM. What year has the Navy publicly set as the benchmark for being ready to fight a war with China?
Well, it needs to be right now. We know what China has said.
I'm glad to hear that, but there is a publicly set date.
Well, we know it wouldn't be prudent for me in this environment to reveal when we think we're ready. That's what China has said, and we understand what they're saying, and we want to be capable and ready for it.
Not a filibuster. 2027 is the year. According to unclassified DoD assessments, how many warships does China have in its Navy today?
Many and growing.
370. It's the largest Navy in the world. How many does the U.S. Navy have today?
Thanks to this budget, it's increasing
it's a number. I'm looking for a
number. But it's just south of 300.
Okay. 296, pretty close. How many ships is China expected to field by 2030?
I believe that's a classified number, but it's going to go up at a rapid rate.
Report that was released. There's an unclassified number.
It's going up at a rapid rate.
Let me help you out. 435. Let's see if we do better in EUCOM. What corridor in eastern Poland is vulnerable and a priority for U.S. reinforcements? It connects Belarus to a Russian region.
I'm sure you can tell me.
I can tell you. It's the Suwalki Gap. Which heavily militarized Russian territory connected the Suwalki Gap? It contains nuclear-capable missiles. It threatens all of NATO. It's right there in the middle of Eastern Europe.
I see we're playing a quiz game here.
It's
ultimately,
Kaliningrad
thankfully,
Oblast.
we're getting our NATO allies to step up in their spending to make sure that they can hold the line.
Mr. Secretary, I asked you a specific question. Thank you. It's Kaliningrad Oblast. So, what percentage of Ukrainian frontline casualties, let's talk drones, are now caused by FPV drones?
A very large percentage, and we're studying that conflict closely to understand
I hope so.
that fact.
It's over 70%. And which U.S. service has written doctrine or standardized procurement for integration of FPV drones?
That's the Army.
I wish that were the case, but actually the answer is none of them. So we're not prepared yet, and we need to get there fast. Let me turn to a different topic. A few weeks ago, when my office opened up in Fredericksburg, I spoke to the mother of one F-18 pilot who flew the March 15th mission over the Red Sea in Yemen that you discussed over Signal. I spoke to her again on Tuesday and asked her if there was anything she wanted me to bring up. She believes that you need to resign. She also had several questions, but one thing, she said she would appreciate an apology for putting classified information. Her son couldn't even tell her where the Truman was going, but into the Houthi PC small group Signal chat that risked her son's life and the mission. Mr. Secretary, yes or no, do you think you owe her an apology?
Please make sure to let her know how grateful we are for the skill and heroism of her.
I am very much grateful. I'm sure everybody in this room is grateful. I'm proud of what her son has done. The question is, do you owe her an apology for your actions? Are you going to be accountable?
It was an incredibly successful mission. Her son did great work.
They did a magnificent job.
Thankfully, the Houthi campaign was successful.
Secretary, I agree with you. Magnificent job. The performance of those pilots and Navy personnel, magnificent. We're talking about what you did and accountability. Are you going to apologize to the mother or not?
I don't apologize for success.
You don't apologize for putting her son's life in danger and for putting the mission in jeopardy. Well, that's really disappointing and not befitting the type of leadership that our troops and families deserve. It's frankly a stunning lack of OPSEC. Privates are trained to do much better than that. It was reckless. And it sounds like that accountability doesn't extend as far as the Secretary of Defense. So I think you should resign. The mother says she wants you gone. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Sorensen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the Secretary, to the General for joining us today. Mr. Secretary, I'm hopeful that we can come to an agreement that we need both sides of the chambers working together for the betterment of the military. Do you believe that bipartisanship is essential to the mission of our armed forces, yes or no?
I think bipartisanship can be a wonderful thing.
Great. Because I didn't come to Congress with political baggage. I was called here because, I believe, and my constituents believe, that we need impartial, bipartisan people to find solutions to complex problems. But today, this nation is being pushed and pulled in so many different directions. I had a constituent this weekend that said, Eric, I don't even know what to believe anymore. Facts don't matter. Conspiracy theories run rampant like brush fires without anyone to quell them. So I'm hoping you can shoot straight from the hip with me. We're almost done. Do you have a targeted number of reductions in civilian personnel in our armed forces?
We have very diligently tried to identify the places where we might need to make changes, but for the most part, it's been a DRP process, a volunteer process of civilians to try to reduce the number for cost savings.
Is there an analysis that supports how you're coming up with these decisions?
We looked at about 8 to 10%, Congressman, but ultimately, everyone here acknowledges that the civilian size of the DoD has exploded over the last 20 years. And so where there are room for efficiencies, we are actively trying to find them and right-size those spots, because a lot of those places are not making us more nimble or faster at what we do. And
what
it's
do we say to the
about
people,
the people, but it's the numbers.
Right. What do we say to the people that have strived in their entire life? These are former, retired members of the military working as civilians back home. What do we say to them?
Well, almost all of them took a voluntary DRP to separate.
Do you have a timeline for making these cuts?
Like I said, almost all of them were volunteers who themselves decided to retire early.
Okay, I want to reset for just a moment. And I'm going to be honest with you. I learned a lot about military service from both of my grandpas who served and fought in World War II. My grandpa Sorensen was a proud Navy photographer. I have his photos. They're framed above my desk here on Capitol Hill. I learned to be proud of him. And from him, I learned how to become proud of veterans, which is why I want to talk about a different veteran, one who served in the Korean War from 1951 to 55. He served courageously like my grandpa Sorensen. But unlike my grandpa, this veteran was forced to resign from the Navy. I'm talking about Harvey Milk, because he was gay. You see, as a kid, all I wanted to be was the weatherman on TV. You know, I learned that I could have gone into the Army or the Navy to learn meteorology, but someone like me wasn't allowed. They didn't want someone like me, Mr. Secretary. There wasn't anything that I could do to change myself or the way that my nation thought of me. And so I want to keep this very simple. Do you believe that Harvey Milk is a veteran who deserves his country's thanks?
Sir, the decision to rename the ship was...
I'm just asking, do you believe that Harvey Milk is a veteran who deserves his country's thanks? Yes or no?
If his service was deemed honorable, yes.
Yesterday, the Secretary of the Navy was in your seat. He couldn't give me a straight answer. I disagree with your leadership and his, because I believe that every veteran deserves our thanks. We all walk in the footsteps of leaders before us, and you may not find the value in the fact that many of those people are women with different skin colors, different backgrounds, different talents, immigrants, gay, straight, transgender, disabled. You may want to change it, but you can't. Because the America that you and I both serve is a place where everyone has the ability, or should have the ability, to grow up and be the hero their grandpa was. I wanted to do that when I was a kid. We're going back to that time. Gay kids like me, they don't want to go into the Army. They don't want to go into the Navy because you don't care for them. It's happening all over our country. My grandpa taught me never to judge the value of a veteran's service. And I hope, Mr. Secretary, you learn to do the same in your capacity. And you can find it in your heart to make that part of your process. May God continue to watch over our troops, our veterans, and our military families. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Bell.
Mr. Secretary, unlike my colleague down the dais, I don't feel sorry for you. I visited with soldiers in war zones whose life is on the line, so a few tough questions. I think you'll be okay. And so my first question is, are you authorized to disclose intelligence that would put our troops in harm's way to our enemies?
Well, I reject the premise of the
just saying,
question.
Just as a hypothetical, are you authorized to do that?
I have not and do not.
Exactly, and I assume that. So when you told our ranking member that everything that you say is authorized, that wasn't completely accurate, correct?
What I said is that every way that I communicate is authorized.
You actually said everything that you said is authorized. I wrote it down. Now, with that said, and the reason I bring that up is because it's about accountability. And we're talking about this war ethos. The primary component of that is accountability. And I'm going to indulge me in a quick analogy. Republicans introduced a bill on the House floor a few days ago, a resolution standing against terror, racism, hate, anti-Semitism, which as an American, as a black man, I'm going to stand against those things 6 times a week, twice on Sunday. Now, the nefarious part was there was a line that was stuck at the end of that resolution that essentially gave a shout out to law enforcement, which I do support, but also to ICE, which right now, a lot of Americans have a problem with the way ICE is being deployed. And I'm not happy with what they're doing, nor do I want to shout them out for that. And so accountability was, I didn't duck from the question. I went and I talked to my constituents. I went on social media. I did interviews to explain exactly where I stood, that I stand against hate. I stand against racism. I stand against anti-Semitism. And I hate that line was stuck in there. That's accountability. So when we're asking you these questions and you're ducking and you're not answering them directly, that's not a culture of a war. What was the term? A war ethos, a warrior ethos. I'm looking at members who serve, and they're taking their lead from you. That starts with you. And if we have troops who are in war zones and they're watching while they're risking their lives, and you can't just answer some tough questions, what kind of culture is that setting? So, as a prosecutor, when I think about what's happening in California and around the country with ICE, it's not only dangerous and unconstitutional, but it raises serious public safety concerns because we have people with masks that are going around saying that they're ICE, and we've had reports of that, saying that they're ICE and committing crimes. And that's a big problem. But it gets me back to the point of the accountability piece. So, for example, do you believe quality military housing is important? Yes or no? And just keep your mic on for time because I don't only have a minute left.
Our budget commits to robust military housing and barracks up.
Do you believe military children deserve a strong education?
Our budget funds strong education, and we hope more educational choices for military.
Love it. Is it a priority to provide real, reliable care to our veterans?
Of course.
So, Mr. Secretary, we have a problem here because your answers don't match your budget priorities. You said your mission is to restore this warrior ethos and that threats we face are serious, but so must our investments. So when we think of, for example, a $45 million parade, I can think of 45 million things we could do more effectively with $45 million than a parade, such as the things that I mentioned. Military housing, military children's education, providing reliable care for our veterans. All of these things would be higher on the priority than a parade. And so the parade, and when we talk about showing strength, we're not talking about theater. We're not talking about showmanship. We're talking about things that actually make our military more lethal and keeps us safer. And so what I'm saying is that in my limited time left is accountability does matter, and this body cares about what our military is doing because we care about national security, and we all take it very seriously.
Gentleman's time has expired. All time for member questions has expired. The chair now recognizes the ranking member for any closing comments.
Yeah, I just want to thank the chairman for his excellent leadership of the committee. Obviously, highly contentious time. The only comment I would make, a number of members of the other side expressed outrage that we were critical of Secretary Hegseth. I don't know how many of those members sat here when Joe Biden was president, but the savage attacks on Biden and Secretary Austin and Chairman Milley, I mean, the hypocrisy of that was just breathtaking for me to behold. And let me just say, I think I agree with what Mr. Bell just said. You know, tough job. Not as tough as a lot of other jobs, but part of it is you are accountable to this body, and you are accountable to answer questions, even if sometimes they are obnoxious. That's part of the gig. And I do hope going forward that the Department of Defense will have greater contact with this committee. I have not spoken to you one-on-one in the entire time you've been Secretary of Defense, only interacted with you twice. I've been through a ton of Secretaries of Defense that served for presidents, including President Trump. Always had a very good relationship and a very good conversation. Your department is cutting us off in a way that is not helpful to any of the bipartisan hopes that have been expressed by the other side of the aisle. I hope that will change. I hope there will be interactions. I will say, General Kane, you've been very generous and reached out. I've had good communication, and I do appreciate that, because that is responsibility of the job. I haven't met too many people at the Pentagon that like coming over here. In fact, I can't think of one, but it is part of the job in a constitutional republic. We are the people's voice. We are charged with conducting oversight. So I hope that interaction will continue. Criticism is part of the gig. Again, I thank the chairman for conducting an excellent hearing.
Thank you, my friend, and I would say, Ms. McDowell, you crushed it today. So for your first... And to our other two witnesses, thank you for your first appearance before the House Armed Services Committee. Thank you for your service to our country. And with that, we are adjourned.